This McDonald's employee recorded this video and posted it on Instagram right before murdering her manager.
I got sent home early yesterday. I got sent home early today by the same person. I'm telling you, she's a bully. This isn't funny. She needs to understand that just because she's a mother and got children doesn't mean that she can come in this store, disrespecting people, talking to them like everybody's beneath her. Don't have to stop. She's a bully. I'm telling you. She's a bully. She could keep being a bully if she wants to, but that is going to catch up to her. Because it ain't funny at all. It ain't.
And this was all because she was sent home early from work. On July 10, 39-year-old Jennifer Harris and 26-year-old Afeni Mohammed were scheduled to work the same shift at McDonald's in Michigan. Jennifer was a manager and had been working at McDonald's for over 15 years at this point. During their shift that morning, apparently there was an argument and Afeni was asked to leave work early. Afeni left the McDonald's but then apparently returned with a knife, wearing a mask, and she entered through one of the employee entrances and stabbed Jennifer over 15 times. This was all going down in front of customers at the drive-thru, and one customer tried to stop her, but it was already too late. Unfortunately, Jennifer did lose her life, and Afeni was charged with first-degree premeditated murder and is now being held on a $25 million bond. And let me remind you, this was all over a McDonald's job, a most likely part-time job. Let's normalize quitting our jobs when we're not happy because it's not worth it.
This is the story about the blind woman who could see ghosts. So this girl who was blind at birth lived with her father on a single ranch house. So because she was blind at birth, she had spatial awareness. Pretty much she knew how far apart everything was based on what she touched. One day in the living room, the blind woman was talking to a ghost named Ellie. So Ellie said to the blind woman her name and asked her why her face was so messed up. So the blind woman then asked, "Why is my face messed up? What's wrong with it?" And at that point, the father then heard the conversation and snagged the blind woman out of the room and said, "Who were you talking to?" The blind woman then replied, "I was speaking to Ellie," and then the father laughed. Over the course of the next few months, the blind woman started speaking to over 13 ghosts. And each time she would speak, her father would get very, very upset at her for speaking to ghosts. So one day, the blind woman fell in the kitchen and had to call the paramedics. And once the paramedics arrived there, she asked, "Can my dad come with me to the hospital?" The paramedic then replied, "Your dad's been dead for 6 years." Make sure to like for a part 2.
Which countries have the most serial killers? On average, in your lifetime, you will walk past 36 murderers/serial killers. So that actually got me thinking, which countries have the most serial killers? And of course, there's a study, and here are the results. The top 21 countries with the most serial killers, so the countries with the least, are Sweden, the Netherlands, Scotland, Poland, Spain, and Hungary. Placing 15th to 11th, we have Austria, Brazil, Mexico, China, and France. Okay, now this is the top 10 countries that have produced the most serial killers. We have Russia, India, Australia, Germany, and Japan. Placing in the top 5, we have Italy with 97, Canada with 106, South Africa with 117, England with 166, and the United States with 3,204. Now send this to someone who you know lives in one of these countries because you made the list. Elon!
This man in a wheelchair got hit by a semi-truck. In 2007, 21-year-old Ben Carpenter, a wheelchair user from Michigan, experienced one of the most terrifying ordeals imaginable. While crossing a busy intersection, Ben's wheelchair accidentally became lodged in the front grille of a semi-truck. The driver, completely unaware, began driving, dragging Ben along the highway at speeds reaching nearly 50 miles per hour. For 4 agonizing miles, Ben was pinned to the front of the massive vehicle, unable to escape or signal for help, as wind and debris battered his face and body. Witnesses on the road were horrified, some thinking it was a prank or a stunt, until one frantic driver finally managed to pull in front of the truck and wave it down. When the truck finally stopped, Ben was still sitting upright, dazed but alive. Miraculously, he sustained no major injuries. First responders and bystanders were in disbelief. How could someone survive being hurled down a highway, inches from death, for that long? The sheer luck, or perhaps divine intervention, of that day made national headlines, and Ben Carpenter's name became forever tied to one of the most unbelievable survival stories in modern history.
This is why you should be scared of driving down dark roads in Ireland at night. Jane said that one night in the early 2000s, her and her husband were driving down a dark road in Ireland at night. She said that they always played deep, intricate house music to zone out while they drove. They didn't really have conversations on journeys. It was almost like meditation. The headlights of their van lit the immediate darkness. Just a few meters ahead on the hard shoulder, an old woman came into view as she shuffled along in darkness. Jane said that her and her husband acknowledged her simultaneously. They said, "What the heck is she doing here?" Jane said that almost immediately after their acknowledgement of the old lady, time slowed down from about 120 kilometers per hour to walking speed. She said that it was almost as if they had hit an invisible wall but without impact. She said that time jumped forward in increments, like watching a scratched DVD. The hunched old lady was now approaching Jane's side view mirror. She said that the old lady's head detached from her body, but on a long neck. It was as if a human head was attached to a snake. Jane said that her head, still facing the ground, slithered up to the window, bringing them face to face. She had green eyes that glowed in the darkness, with vertically elongated black pupils, set into a face covered in scales, with murky shades of green. And as her mouth opened wider and wider, Jane saw teeth that were tightly packed, sharp, and protruded more and more the wider she opened her mouth. Then, all of the sudden, time resumed and they continued on their journey.
Gruesome Facts You Didn't Know, Part 225. In 1559, King Henry II of France was participating in a jousting tournament. During a match, he was severely wounded in the eye and brain by a splintered lance. He died of his injuries 10 days later, with his death leading to the decline of jousting as a sport in France. Actress and Playboy centerfold Yvette Vickers was last seen in 2010 after withdrawing from her family and friends. When neighbor Susan Savage noticed cobwebs on the mailbox, she went inside to investigate. Upstairs, she discovered her mummified body. Lieutenant Colonel William Henry Rankin is one of only 2 known persons to survive falling from the top of a cumulonimbus thunderstorm cloud. He was forced to eject from his jet when his engine failed. It took him 40 minutes to finally reach the ground. During his descent, he suffered from frostbite, and severe decompression caused his mouth, eyes, ears, and nose to bleed.
This is one of the strangest and most mysterious houses in the world. This is the Winchester Mansion. Found in San Jose, California, this house is over 138 years old, but its backstory leaves a lot of people really confused. So this lady's name is Sarah Pardee. In 1862, Sarah got married to William Winchester. William's family was really rich and famous, and the reason for that is because his family invented the Winchester rifle, which was really popular to use in war at the time. Unfortunately, just less than 20 years after Sarah and William got married, William passed away from tuberculosis, leaving Sarah with a lot of money. Immediately after William died, Sarah moved all the way across the country to San Jose, California, where she bought some land and began building a house. But the thing is, Sarah never stopped building the house. In fact, the home was under construction for over 38 years. But what's inside the house is the weird part. So the house or mansion itself is 24,000 square feet. The house has over 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, 47 fireplaces, 6 kitchens, and over 10,000 windows. Most people's houses look like they were planned out, but it seemed as if the Winchester Mansion got bigger and bigger as time went on. Now the reason for the house being mysterious is because of how it's structured on the inside. There are doors that open up to brick walls and 12-foot drops to the outside. There are also several staircases that lead to nowhere, and multiple secret rooms. To this day, people are discovering more and more rooms every single year inside of the home. But the biggest mystery is why Sarah Winchester made her house so big and confusing. Many people believe that Sarah's house was actually haunted by the spirits of those killed by her husband's gun, as the Winchester rifle was really popular in war and claimed a lot of lives. This is backed by many witnesses who have reported seeing lights turn on by themselves, hearing strange mysterious voices and footsteps, and even seeing ghosts roam the halls. Many experts believe that Sarah Winchester was trying to build her house into one giant, complicated maze. In doing this, the ghost would get confused and wouldn't know where to find her. But the real reason for this house being so weird is unknown. Today, thousands of people go to tour the house on a yearly basis, but unfortunately we'll probably never know the real reason as to why the Winchester house is so mysterious.
So I just got the most terrifying DM of my life today. Basically, someone sent me this screenshot. They say that while they were in the middle of watching my video on Annabelle, they randomly got a notification that said that liquid had been detected in their lightning connector. Now, what's so weird about this is they claim that their phone had not been anywhere near water all day when they got this message. And the message happened right at the start of my Annabelle video, which, if you don't know, is where I showed actual footage of Annabelle leaving her case. And for a while, people have claimed that that footage is cursed. So the fact that this happened is very, very unsettling to say the least.
Horror movies that would be impossible to survive, part 4. A Quiet Place. Now for me, I just talk way too much, so having the fact that I have to be quiet or I'm gonna be unalived by some alien creatures that only react to sound, I'm cooked. Also, if this happens in the spring or the summertime, I have allergies. Bro, I'm sneezing everywhere. You don't want to be anywhere around me if The Quiet Place ever happened. You then have Cabin in the Woods 2012. You are set up from the beginning. You are not supposed to survive. And even the characters that did end up surviving at the end of this movie, they were not supposed to. They had every creature, every maniac, every slasher, anything you can think of, all being ported to that cabin. And then as soon as they got to the mainframe, everything was let free. And if you know the ending of Cabin in the Woods 2012, you know it was absolutely insane. You then have The Descent. Now for me personally, I'm not going cave diving. On top of going into a cave that no one has ever explored yet. You then go into the cave with lighters and all this other stuff that you think is going to protect you. And you get inside of the cave and you get lost. People start losing their mind because the flashlights start losing battery. You then run into some weird humanoid-like creatures known as the Crawlers. That's like a vampire-ish creature. And let's be honest, you're done.
What is the scariest game you've ever played? I get this question almost every time I post a video or stream. And even though I've probably played well over 100 horror games, it's probably something like Dead Space, Outlast, or PT, right? It's actually something you might not have heard of. The scariest game I've ever played is a game called Lost in Vivo. But what makes this game so terrifying? Lost in Vivo takes inspiration from many different horror classics and puts them into one horrifying package. Every different type of scare you can imagine is in this game. It's also one of the only horror games I've ever played that gets scarier the longer you play. If you're not someone that gets scared easily, give this one a try.
Guys, what is going on with children? Because I just heard the story of these 4 girls in the 5th grade that came up with a plan to unalive another boy in their class, all because he cheated on one of the girls. First of all, who is even dating that seriously in the 5th grade? How do these kids even know what cheating is? We're talking about 10-year-olds. So this all happened in Arizona at Legacy Traditional School when a group of 4 girls, all aged 10 and 11 years old, were overheard by other students planning to stab another boy to death during recess. Apparently, each girl had a role in this plan. One was in charge of bringing the knife to school. Another girl was supposed to be the lookout. The 3rd girl was in charge of writing a suicide note to make it seem like the boy took his own life. And the 4th girl would be the one taking his life. Apparently, they had gloves ready so that fingerprints wouldn't be left behind, and they set a date for this entire thing. When other students overheard this crazy plan, they told teachers and police were called. The most chilling part about all of this, well, there's 2. Number 1 being that the girls knew they had to wear gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints behind. And the second part is that 3 out of the 4 girls showed remorse, but the 4th girl, was laughing and smiling throughout the interrogation. They were arrested, but then were released to their parents, and then they were suspended from school. And let me tell you, this reminds me a lot of the Slender Man case in 2014 when two 12-year-old girls lured their friend to a park and stabbed her 19 times.
The average person has about 6,000 thoughts per day, and according to psychologists, about 80% of them are negative. Hear me out. Expressing gratitude towards loved ones gives you an immediate increase in happiness. And if you don't believe me, go try it and then try to come back here and tell me I'm wrong. Social rejection can feel like physical pain, and I, for one, am a firm believer in the research that shows that acetaminophen, like Tylenol, can actually dull this pain as it would a headache. Married people are more likely to self-pleasure than people who live alone, okay? So just keep that one in mind. Humans have this automatic reaction to default to assume somebody is telling the truth, and we will automatically second guess ourselves the moment somebody disagrees, which is why gaslighting can be so dangerous. Having backup plans can actually hinder your main goal. Having a plan B makes it much less likely for plan A to succeed, because in your head you're like, oh, well, I have plan B to fall back on. No, you gotta have plan A if you really want it to go. Sarcasm kind of gets a bad rap for being like rude or negative, but it can actually increase your creativity and encourage abstract thought, especially when you're using it with people that you trust. Nowadays, the average high schooler has about the same level of anxiety as a 1950s psychiatric patient, and honestly, I'm not sure what that means about today's society or about how they treated psychiatric patients.
Russ McKamey, the creator of the most intense haunted house in the entire world, was just arrested for attempted murder. Russ created the horror experience McKamey Manor, which is essentially torture. The actors are allowed to physically harm you, they can shave your eyebrows, make you eat stuff, hold you underwater, and all of this can go on for up to 10 hours. And now Russ has been charged with SA and attempted murder of 2 separate women. This did not take place at the house, so this was in his personal life. But people have been worried about Russ's behavior for years. In a Hulu documentary about the house, multiple people sat down and said that they thought Russ may have bad intentions with the house. One woman claimed that she used the safe word multiple times, which is supposed to allow you to leave, but she was ignored. She eventually had to go to the hospital because of her injuries, and they were so bad that the hospital called the police. And all of this is allowed to happen because you have to sign a 20+ page waiver in order to even go into the house, and it lists hundreds of things that they can do to you. But people travel thousands of miles to get to the house, so they may feel a little bit of pressure to sign it because they went all that way to be there. Russ's bond was initially set at $1,000, but after the second woman came forward, it was set to $100,000. But Russ says everything said about him in the Hulu documentary was false, and now he's suing them for over $8 million.
He was decapitated and eaten on the bus. Timothy Richard McLean Jr. was born on October 3rd of 1985 in Winnipeg, Manitoba. He was described as outgoing, full of life, and adventurous. Tim worked as a carnival worker, and this was a job that matched his energetic personality and love of travel. On the evening of July 30th of 2008, 22-year-old Tim boarded a Greyhound bus that was headed to Winnipeg. He had just gotten off of work and was ready to head back home. The journey was long, so Tim chose a seat in the back of the bus. He spent most of his trip just listening to music in his headphones and texting his friends. The bus made a stop in Erickson, Manitoba, and a man by the name Vince Lee would board the bus. Vince was sitting in the front but eventually made his way back next to Tim after a rest stop. Tim ended up falling asleep and had his head resting on the window pane with his headphones over his ears. Without warning, Vince took out a large knife and started stabbing Tim repeatedly. The other passengers on the bus were thrown into chaos and panic once they realized what was happening. The bus driver ended up pulling to the side of the road, and he and those other passengers fled that bus. Once everyone was outside, Vince started to decapitate Tim's head, then showed his head through the window so that everyone could see, and then he started to eat his flesh. Once police arrived, the passengers of that bus were outside crying and throwing up while Vince was still inside of that bus consuming Tim. Vince refused to get off of the bus, which resulted in a police standoff for several hours. About 5 hours later, Vince tried to break through a window to escape, but that's when he was arrested. Parts of Tim's body were placed in plastic bags, and his ears, nose, and tongue were found in Vince's pockets. Tim's eyes and a part of his heart were never recovered, and they just assumed that Vince consumed them. Once Vince was arrested, it was revealed that he was a recent immigrant from China and he was suffering from an untreated schizophrenia. Vince claimed that he did this to Tim because he was given divine instructions because he believed that he was an evil force threatening humanity. Vince was charged with second-degree murder but was not found responsible due to his mental illness. The NCR verdict meant that Vince would not be incarcerated but instead would be in a secure psychiatric facility. Many believed that the ruling was too lenient, while others argued that it highlighted the need for compassion and better mental health care. After all that, Vince ended up being released from the psychiatric facility and given a new identity.
There's a really famous mystery called the Dyatlov Pass. It's about these 9 really experienced hikers in the 50s. They set off on this journey and they reached the first checkpoint, but they didn't make it to the second checkpoint. And there was a big search that goes out to make sure they're okay. The army gets involved and they go and follow the route to find the hikers. And they come across these prints in the snow that led down the mountain. And some of the prints were bare feet. Some had one shoe and one barefoot. And it's all 9 of the hikers, and they find 3 of the hikers, and they're all deceased. And there's one who's naked. There's one who's up in one of the trees, and there's these deep gouges on the tree as if some animal had been scratching at this tree. There's more footprints that lead away from those 3, and the footprints lead where the other 6 hikers were, and they're all deceased as well. And the women were wearing men's clothing and vice versa. Some of their clothes had trace levels of radiation, and some of them had parts of their face removed, it looked like. Lips, nose, ears. It almost looked like surgical precision removal. There was a person in there who their chest had basically been caved in, but there's no sign of anything that could have done this damage. And suddenly the Soviet government says, we're going to shut this investigation down. All we know is that the 9 hikers who died from an unknown, unnatural force. Sealed.
I say goodbye to my wife and kids and make the 3-hour trek to St. Paul to fight for our way of life, because day after day, it is under attack from Metro liberals.
A Minnesota state senator just arrested, accused of soliciting a minor for prostitution.
You really can't make this shit up. So this is Justin Eichhorn. He's a senator from Minnesota. And you heard that right. He was recently arrested during a sting operation because he was trying to purchase time with a minor for sex. So Justin had been speaking online to someone that he believed was a 16-year-old girl. But when he finally showed up to meet this young girl to rape her, because that's what it would have been, instead of finding a minor, Justin encountered a major problem. The authorities were there waiting for him to arrive, and they quickly arrested him. Now, this is incredibly significant because Justin is a senator, a lawmaker. And he was recently in the news because he was one of 5 co-authors of a bill that would officially designate Trump derangement syndrome as an officially recognized mental illness in Minnesota. Now, it isn't surprising to me that a politician has been caught in a pedophile sting. We already know that there are tons of politicians that are pedophiles. I've covered this issue extensively on all of my social media. But when you've recently been in the news for calling a large number of Americans deranged, your constituents, and then this happens, it's just not surprising. And thankfully, when you go to look up his information, he has resigned. And he's thankfully no longer a senator in Minnesota.
Maria was sentenced to prison after she lit her daughter's essayer on fire. So this is Maria, and this is her daughter, Veronica. And when her daughter was 13 years old, he was held at knife point by their neighbor, and he essayed her to the tune of the R word I can't say on TikTok. Now, it was reported, and he ended up serving 9.5 years in prison. But after he got out, he started harassing the mom at the bus stop, saying things like, "Oh, how's your daughter? How's she doing?" Really messed up stuff, and to the mom's point, showing zero remorse for what he did. Then he got off the bus, and he went into a local bar. That's when Maria got off the bus and went to a gas station. She bought a gallon of gas, and she had a lighter. And she walked up to him at the bar, poured gas on his head, and lit him on fire. Then she just walked out and started strolling down the street. The dude ends up with 90% of his body burned, and several days later, he dies at the hospital. When police find her, she admits to the whole thing, says that she just really wanted to hurt him, not unalive. She ends up getting 9.5 years, but she gets out in about half the time.
Creepy last words people said right before dying. One evening, Jim Woodford, a wealthy atheist man who had contracted a nerve disease, was surveying a property that he wanted to sell. He had become quite dependent on painkillers as a way to manage his pain. He was sitting in his truck watching the sunset when he decided to take more painkillers. He said that he waited for the relief to set in, but instead of relief, he felt like his feet were on fire. He said that he looked down to see if his truck was on fire, and then the feeling of fire spread rapidly throughout his whole body and seized his lungs. He said that he realized that he had overdosed. Jim said that all of the sudden he became hyper aware of all of his shortcomings in life. And although he hadn't prayed since he was a kid, he cried out the words, "God forgive me," before collapsing onto the steering wheel. Jim said that his spirit left his body and plunged into a realm of darkness, where the land looked scorched. As he walked, he came to what looked like a pit. The walls of the pit looked like black coal, he said. As he looked down, he saw the dim flicker of a red light. He then heard the sound of two large doors creaking open. He said that a large demonic creature that had a body made of fire and smoke began crawling out of the pit. He said that it was so hideous and evil looking that not even Hollywood could replicate it. And it was sniffing, as if it was searching for him. It finally locked eyes with him. Jim said that he could just feel its hatred for him and all of mankind. It started crawling faster towards Jim. He said that the creature got out of the pit and stood before him. It knew his name. It said, "Jim, we're here for you. This is your time with us." Jim was terrified and he cried out, "God help me." Just then, Jim said that the creature was struck with a beam of light and 3 angels appeared and saved him. He said that they took him to heaven and one of the angels reviewed Jim's life with him. Jim realized that he had not done enough in life and that he was very selfish and materialistic. Jim said that he also encountered Jesus and he told him that it was not yet his time. Jim said that he was sent back to his body and he woke up in the hospital. He had been clinically dead and on life support. When he spoke to the neurologist after, he said that Jim had no brain activity. After Jim recovered, he became a Christian and wrote a best-selling book called Heaven, An Unexpected Journey.
That's 27-year-old Hannah Freeman after she was given a 7-day sentence. She's a total daddy's princess. Let me tell you what she did, but first, she's a 4th grade teacher from North Ridgeville, Ohio. So she and her boyfriend had broken up in April of 2024, and on November 26th of that year, she had gone to his apartment. They kind of had some words, and then he thought she left. But when he looked out, he saw her getting into his vehicle, and she stole 2 backpacks that each had a laptop in them, his medication, wallet, his car keys. So he called police to report what she did. He told police that she had been going to his place of work and following him home and basically stalking him. He later found out that she racked up over $1,000 on his credit card at Amazon. And then the very next day, November 7th, she had followed him to work, and I guess he looked out and saw her sitting in his vehicle, so he once again called the police. She denied being in his vehicle or stealing things out of his car the night before, and she even told police that she was invited to be there where he works and that they had had lunch together at Raising Cane's. But the ex said that is absolutely not true. So the police ended up looking at video surveillance footage that showed that she came to her ex's work 33 different times on 19 different days over a 30-day period. So she ended up getting arrested that day and received several felonies. The charges include menacing by stalking, 2 counts of burglary, 2 counts of aggravated theft, and identity fraud. She was indicted in December and took a plea deal in June of 2025, where she pleaded guilty to 3 misdemeanors: disorderly conduct, obstructing official business, and possessing criminal tools. And come to find out, this isn't the first time Hannah Freeman has had trouble with the law, despite her dad being the chief of police. But I'll do a different video for that, otherwise this one's going to end up being really long. So come back later for a part 2. But anyway, at her sentencing hearing, the judge sentenced her to 18 months of probation or community control, with the first 7 days to be spent in jail. And her attorney lost it. He immediately tried to withdraw her plea and said that he and the prosecutor had agreed there would be no jail time. And the judge is like, okay, well, you guys didn't discuss that with me. I'm the one who gives the sentence. And they go back and forth for a couple minutes arguing about it until the judge finally just says, this is done. Now, let me back up real quick. Right before the judge announced the sentence, he gave Hannah the opportunity to speak, and she was literally reading something off a piece of paper. Now, like I said, I'm going to make another video about her dad, who is the chief of police, and her mother, who has a history of getting arrested for shoplifting. And we'll also talk about what she did in December of 2022 when she got a noise violation and tried to get out of being arrested by telling everybody, my dad's the police chief, so I won't get in trouble. So make sure you come back for that. I'm going to end this by saying, I guess it doesn't matter who her dad is because she got in trouble. And 7 days in jail is a slap on the wrist for what she did. I've seen people get life sentences who don't respond like that.